All right, guys, so now we're going to look at the Bootstrap grid system. Now, this isn't to be confused with CSS grid, which is part of CSS. The Bootstrap grid system uses classes to create layouts, and it actually uses Flexblocks under the hood. So just keep that in mind, that this is Bootstrap's own grid system, not CSS grid. So we're going to start off just by creating a simple row and some columns. So let's go under this basic grid layout comment, and we're going to create a class of row. So rows are horizontal, and in that row you have columns. So in here I'm actually going to have a class of col. Now, in addition to that, just so you can see the outline, I'm going to do a light background, so BG light, and I'm also going to add a border. I know we haven't gone over borders yet, but if you add a class of border, it'll just give you a simple 1 pixel border. Okay, and then in there, I'll just say 1 of 2, because it's going to be 1 of 2 columns. Now I'm going to copy this down, and the text will be 2 of 2, and then I'm going to save. Okay, now remember, we're inside of a container here, so it's going to end there, and it's going to be put in the middle. But as you can see, I now have 2 columns, no matter what, no matter how small or large the screen is. Okay, because I just use col. I'm going to get into responsive columns in a little bit. Now, let's say I wanted 3 columns to go all the way across. I could go ahead and just take this row, and then I could add onto this, and I'll say 3 of 3. Save that, and now I have 3 columns. Okay, and you can have absolutely any content that you want in these. You could have cards, you could just have some text, you could have images, whatever you want to put within this. And again, I only added the background and the border so you can see exactly where these columns are. Now, when you're using the class of col, your columns are always going to all be the same width, right? So both of these are the same, all 3 of these are the same. However, you can specify the number of slices that you want that column to take up. And what I want you to do is think of it like this. So basically we have a row, and then we have 12 slices. So if you have a column for every slice, you're going to have 12 columns like this, right? It only takes up 1 slice. If you're going to have 2 columns, then both of those columns would take up 6 of the 12 slices. If you're going to have 3 equal columns, then each one will take up 4 of the 12 slices. Okay, if you want to have 1 big column, then it's going to take up all 12. And if you want to split it and you don't want it to be even, you could have 1 column take up 4 and 1 take up 8. So 8 plus 4 is 12. So what we could do is, let's come down here, and we'll have a class of row again, and then I'm going to do a class of col-6, and I'll also add my bg-light and my border class, just so we can see this, and I'll say 1 of 2, and then I'll go ahead and add that. Now this is going to give me the same thing as this right here, because I'm taking up 6 of the 12 slices for the first column and 6 of the 12 for the next one. However, if I wanted to, I could say row, and I guess I'll just copy that, and then instead of 6, I'm going to say I want this one to take up 4, and I want this one to take up 8 of the 12. Now if I save that, you'll see this one takes up 4 slices, this one takes up 8. So now they're not even because I specified that. Okay, now in all of these columns, no matter what, they're always going to stay the same. Usually you're going to want your columns to stack on small screens, on mobile devices. And when I say stack, I just mean that you want them to go on top of each other. So we can have responsive columns. So I'm going to just grab this here. And then what I'm going to do is, instead of just col-6, I'm going to say col-md-6 for both of these. So md-6. So this means that on mediums, I'm just going to make this bigger at first. So this means on medium screens and up, so anything above the medium breakpoint will be 2 columns, because this 6 will take effect. So if I save that, you can see 1 of 2, should be 2 of 2. Yeah, 2, 2. Sorry about that. I mean, this doesn't really matter, but I want it to be correct. Okay, now if I make this smaller, once I hit the medium screen or breakpoint, watch what happens. There we go. So now these are stacked on top of each other. Okay, once I hit medium, you can see these other ones stay the same because when you use call dash a number, it's just the same all the time. But if we add a screen size, then we can change it. Now let's take it a step further, and I'll copy that, and then right under it, let's say we want to do on medium screens. How do I want to do this? We'll say on let's do small. So on small screens, we want this to take up 2, right? And then I'm actually going to copy this down, and we're going to say 3, 4 of 4. Okay, and what this will do is on small screens and up, there'll be 2 columns, right? Takes up 6 slices each. They'll stack on mobile screens, but what if I want to show 4 columns on large screens? So I'm going to add to this and say call dash LG dash 4 because I want it to take up, I'm sorry, 3 because I want it to take up 3 of the 12 slices because we have 4 columns. All right, so I'm going to just take that and add that to all of these. And let's save that. And now, since I'm above large, the large breakpoint, we have 4 columns. Each one takes up 3 slices of the 12, right? If I go down and I hit small, is it small? Yes. Well, no, I'm hitting medium, but since I have small, it's going to be everything above small until I get to large, right? And then once I get to mobile, or very small, it's going to stack. All right, so again, just in case this is confusing, it starts off stacked because I used the screen sizes, right? If I do just call dash a number, then it's always going to be in columns, which you really don't want because if you have 3 columns, you're going to have to squish the content in there and it's going to look funny. So you usually want it to stack, so you're usually going to use at least call MD, whatever. All right, now once I hit, in this case, small screens, which is right here, it turns to 2 columns because they're going to take up 6 slices, okay, 6 of the 12. And then it'll stay like that through medium, and then once I hit large, which is right here, then it turns into 4 columns because then we're taking up 3 of the 12 slices. All right, so I hope that makes sense. I know this is a little difficult to understand at first, but it'll grow on you really quick, trust me. Now, another thing that is really cool that I don't really use, but I think I'll start when I use Bootstrap, is using row calls. So basically, if I create a row, right, and then I have a class of call, and then we'll do our bg-light border, and I'll just put the text of column in here. All right, now if I just put a bunch in here, as long as it's under 12, they're all just going to stay on the same row in the same line, right? Now, let's say that I want each of these to take up 3 columns. I could go in here and on each one, I could say call dash 4, because remember, 3 columns, each one will take up 4 slices. Or I could go to this div and I could use row calls. So I could say row calls and just say I want 3 columns. And now if I save, it'll just turn this into 3 columns no matter how many of these I have. I can add a bunch more and it's going to stay in 3 columns. If I wanted 4, then I could change that to 4. Now it's in 4 columns. If I wanted 2, I would change it to 2. And it's going to be the number of columns, not slices. So if you're doing it this way, where you're adding each column number, then you do 6 because it's taking 6 of the 12. But here, you just simply put the number of columns. All right, so let's put that back to 4. Now, you can also make this responsive by adding screen sizes. So what you could do is just say row dash calls 1 to start with, and then once you hit medium screens, let's say once we do medium screens, we'll do row calls and then MD, and then we'll change the 2. And then let's say once we hit large screens, so row calls LG, then we'll go to 3. So now if I save this, and let's start with a small screen, and they're stacked because of this, row calls 1. Once I hit medium screens, it should turn into 2. Okay, there's 2 columns. Once I hit large, it turns into 3. All right, so you have this responsive grid, these responsive columns, and we didn't have to specify anything in these besides call. The decision to where we break it up is in the wrapper div as opposed to what we did here. Okay, and I honestly don't do this too much, but I do like it. Now we can also nest columns, so I'll just take 3 of these, and then down here let's do a row, and I'll paste that in, and I'm just going to add up some padding onto each one of these. So I'll put my cursor here, and then let's add P-3. Okay, so now we have 3 columns, right? And then in the last one, what I'm going to do is add a row inside of it, and then we'll do call, and let's say we'll do text-bg dark, and I'll just say nest, and I'll put 2 columns in there. So now I have 3 columns, but in the last one I have a nested row with two more columns. So you can do that as well. And then if you want to add space in between, now usually you wouldn't put the border and stuff on the actual call. You would have like a card or something inside of it. So what I mean is, let's go down here and say class row, and then I'm going to do call -md4, and then in here I'll have a class of, let's do some padding on this, so P3, and then I'll say text-bg-primary, and say content item. Okay, and then I'm just going to grab the call MD4, and we want 2 more of those. Okay, so it'll look like this. Now, if I wanted to add some more space in between these, I could use gutters. And the way we do that is with G dash and then 1 through 5. So if I do 0 through 5. So if I do G3 and save, you see it actually got more narrow. If I do G0, then there's none. If I do G1, and then if I do G5, I think the default is 4. Let's see, so that's 4. And then if I have none, if I save, yeah, so the default is 4. If you want less, you can go under 4. If you want more, you can go to 5. And if you wanted to, edit your Sass when you're compiling your own Bootstrap, you can add more spacing. You could do like G6, 7, and so on, just like you could do with margin and padding. So those are gutters. And then actually I want to show you 2 more things, offsetting and ordering. So for offsetting, let's say we have a row, right? And then, actually I'll just take what I just did here. Okay, except I'll just take the gutters off. And then let's say I want to have 2 columns that are on, let's say I just want to get rid of this. I just want these 2 and I want it to be on this side. If I just get rid of one of these, it's obviously going to start at the left. But let's say I want to push it over. So what I could do is add an offset. So I could say right here, let's say offset -4. And I'll save that. And now what it did is it basically pushed it over 4 spaces. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 offset, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, so that is offsetting. And a lot of times what you do is you'll have, let's say you have a wide container like we have here, but maybe you want something shorter in the middle like this. So in that case, what you do is do like call MD-6. I don't know, I'll just say hello world. And if I do that, that takes up 6, so it's like this. Now, if I want to put that in the middle, I could offset it 3. So I would push it over 3. So I'll say offset -3, and then that'll put it in the middle. Okay, in fact, let me just add a border to this so you can see exactly where it's at. So you can see it's right in the middle. It takes up 6, but it's in the middle because I offset it 3. If I offset it 6, it'll push it all the way over like that. Okay, so again, this might be a little confusing, but you'll definitely grasp onto it as time goes on. And then the last thing is ordering. So let's just grab a few of these. And let's create a row. Okay, so we have some columns, but let's put some numbers in here so we can tell what's what. So we'll do 2, 3, and 4. And naturally, it's going to be 1 through 4, but let's say I wanted to order it differently. So I could add in here, say order -2, order I don't know, 4, order -1, and then this one will be order -3, and I'll save that. And now notice that they're in a different order. We have 3, 1, 4, 2. So if you create a grid and you want to switch spots with any of them, you can do that. And this is helpful if you're getting your content from a database, which you can't change the order unless you edit the code. You can go in your HTML and you can switch the positioning of the columns. All right, so I know this was a long one, but learning the Bootstrap grid system is really important, and we'll be using it through all of our projects, so you're going to get more comfortable with it if this didn't really clear things up for you. All right, so in the next video, we're going to look at Flexbox. And by the way, this is using Flex. If I go ahead and look at the CSS, like let's go to the row right here, you can see it's display flex. Okay, but there is a D-Flex class that you can use to use Flexbox without using the grid system. All right, guys, so now we're going to look at Flexbox, particularly the D-Flex class and the classes that we can use with it. So what I have here is just a bunch of basically divs that have a bunch of other divs inside of them. I just changed the colors on some of them so we can tell, the difference in what we're working on. So first off, I'm going to start with this div right here. There's just a bunch of divs with a text BG light, and I just put some padding on it. And what I want to do is wrap it in a class of dflex. And what that does is it adds display flex in the CSS. And I do assume that you know the basics of CSS and Flexbox. So what that does is it puts it into a row. Okay, so just that class there will put it into a flex row. Now you might want it as a column. Okay, so for this next one here, I'm going to add dflex, but in addition to that, we can add the class of flex column. If I save, we don't see much of a difference, but this is in fact a Flexbox. So if I show you here, let's take a look right here, and you'll see display flex, and we have flex direction is set to column. Now you can set it to a row or column depending on the screen size as well. So let's look at this primary area. So if I do D-flex and turn it to a flex column, in a lot of cases what you want to do is have it in a row unless it's on small screens. So what I'll do is set it to a column by default and then say I'm sorry, not D. We want to do flex dash, and then on medium screens and up, then I want it to be a row. So if I save that, it's a column right now, but if I extend it past medium, then it turns into a row. We're looking at the blue, the primary. Okay, so column row. And you can set it to any screen size you want. You can do flex LG row if you wanted to, or flex LG column. Now we also have flex wrap. So by default, let's say I have a bunch of these, and we want to do D-flex. If it goes off the screen here, by default, it'll just give you this scroll, and that's not usually what you want if for some reason you do want this kind of layout. So what we can do is add a class of flex wrap, and now they'll just go on to the next line. Okay. Now, as far as alignment goes, so these three black areas, we're going to look at the justify content classes. So let's do deflex, right? Now, when you're using a flex row, justify content pertains to the space horizontally. So this extra space here. Let's say I want to move this to the start, then I could set the class of justify content dash, I'm sorry, not start. It is at the start right now. I want to do end because I want to align this to the end. I was thinking in terms of margin. All right, so now we have justify content end. For this second one here, let's say deflex, right? And then let's say we want the extra space to be around each item. So we could say justify content around. That includes the, the left and right sides. And then for this one here, let's turn that to a flex box. And let's say we want the space in between. So we can say justify content between, and now it's not on the sides, but it's all in between. Okay, so those are the justify classes. Now, if you want to align items, we can make this a flex box, and let's make it a column. So flex column. Okay, and we're looking at the light right here, these ones. And notice that I put a height of 300 pixels. That's because without the height, we wouldn't be able to really see the difference. So I'm going to align the items to the end. So we'll say align dash items dash end. And now we have a column and we have it pushed all the way to the end. Okay, and I actually meant to put a couple more of these in here because I want to show you if we did align items center, then we could put the column in the center. All right, now if we want to align one specific item, we can use the align self classes. So what I'll do here is make this flex column, and then once I do that, we're not going to really see any difference, but down here in one of these, I'm going to add align dash self, and let's do center for this one. So align self center. And that will put this particular item in the center. If I want to put it to the end, I could say align dash self dash end. That'll push it all the way over. Okay, and then finally we have the flex grow class. So right now we just have a flex box with the items in a row, but let's say I want this to grow and take up the extra space. So what I could do is on that first item, the primary item, I could say flex dash grow dash 1, and now that takes up the extra space. Okay, so there's a lot that you can do with deflex along with these assisting classes. All right, guys, so cards are a common way to display content in any kind of website, really, a blog or an application where you're showing products or users or anything at all. Basically, it's a box with a border, and it can be styled with background color, shadows, header, footer. You can have images. So Bootstrap has a lot of different tools, a lot of different classes to create cards. So I'm going to start off with a basic text card, and I'm just going to type it out so you know exactly what classes go into it. So we have an overall or parent class of card, and then card body is going to add the padding. So you want to make sure you add that as well. And then we can put a paragraph in here, and there's also a class of card text. And then I'll do lorem 20, enter, just to add some dummy text. And you can see we just get a border with some padding. So very simple. It's going to extend to the container. So I think what I'm going to do is just add a width onto this div just to keep it, not as wide. So we'll say style, and let's set a width to 25 rem units. All right. So that's a basic card. We can also add a title. So above the paragraph, I'll say H5. It could be any kind of heading. And then card dash title. And I'll just say card title. And there we go. So basic card. You could put an icon in there, make it look nice. Now to add an image is pretty simple. So I'm just going to copy what I just did. And then here, let's paste that in, and we can add an image above the body. You don't want to put it within the body because then it will have padding around it. So let's say image, and I'm going to use a dummy image from pick some. So we can do pick some dot photos, photos slash, and then 200. And we're going to add a class to this as well of card dash image dash top. Okay, so now you can see that it's part of the card, although it should have rounded corners. Let's see. Card image top, is that correct? No, I'm sorry, it's IMG, not image. Okay, so now it's better integrated with the card. You can see it has the rounded image, rounded corners at the top. So we can also have a header and a footer. So I'm going to paste in the card again, and above the body, let's add a card dash header, and I'll just say card header. Okay, and then we can go below the body, still within the card, and say card dash footer, and we'll say card footer. Save that, and there we go. As you can see, it has a different background, a light gray background. Now, most commonly, you're probably going to put these in columns. So you'll have, 3 in a row with some text and icons or an image. So let's do that. And I also want to show you the different colors that we can use as well. So let's create a row. We already learned how to use the grid system. And then we'll do call dash MD dash 4 or 3. And then I'm going to paste in the card. Okay, and then let's see, let's just grab this call MD3, and we want 4 of these. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now if I save it, so they're going to be stacked on small screens. Actually, I'm sorry, we want to get rid of this width. So let's grab style width. We're going to select those and remove those. Okay, so now you can see that they're stacked. And if I make it bigger on medium screens and up, then we have 4 columns because they each take up 3 slices of the 12. All right, now I just want to show you that we can add different colors, background colors. So let's go to the first one here, and we want to go to the div that has the class of card, and we can add a text. We can do text BG. Let's do primary here. And now we have a blue card, and then I'll go to the next one, and we'll do text BG danger. Let's go to this one, text BG dash warning. Did I miss one? Oh, this one right here. So I'll do text. Let's do BG dark. All right, so you can have different background colors. Now, if, in addition to using the grid system with the columns, you can also create what's called a card group. So I'm going to copy the one I did with the image, which is this one right here. And I want to create a group with these. So I'm going to go right here, and we have a class called card group. And then I'll just paste in 3 of these, save it, and now if we come down here, you can see that it's in a group. It's just like a button group where the sides have the rounded corners and the middle one doesn't. And obviously you'd have different images and stuff, so it would look a little better, but that's a card group. Now there's also something called a placeholder that we can use that is really cool if you have like, if you're loading blog posts or something and you just want, like, instead of a spinner, you can have just this dummy content image, which looks pretty cool. So I'm going to grab, let's see, actually I'll just type it out. So right here, let's do a class of card, and then I'm just going to add a style onto this. So we'll say style, let's add a width of 18 rem, and then we're going to have our card body, and we'll do an H5 card dash title, and then I'm also going to add a class of placeholder. So it's going to be placeholder dash glow. All right, and in here I'm just going to put a span, and have a class of placeholder, and I'm just also going to add call6 for that. Okay, so what we see here is just this glowing box because it's supposed to show that where the content is still loading. So you wouldn't just put this on your page and leave it. You'd have it displayed while your data is loading. Okay, whether it's fetching it from an API that's getting it from a database or what. And then under that div, under the H5, let's do a paragraph, and let's do a class of card-text, but I also want to add placeholder glow here as well. And then we'll do some lines, so span with the class of placeholder, and let's say call-7. These will just make the length different. So I'll copy this down, and we'll make different lengths here. So we'll say call7, let's do call4, we'll do another 4, and then 6, and then 8. Okay, so I'll go ahead and save that, and we'll take a look, and you can see we have different lengths. All right, and then we might do a button, or we could do a link that is formatted as a button. So a tag with a class of button. Let's do button primary, and let's do disabled because it's supposed to be still loading, and then placeholder and call-6. Okay, so it's cool. It's like a placeholder of the content. All right, so that's cards. In the next video, we're going to look at list groups and badges. So now we're going to look at list groups and badges. So we'll start with list groups, which are just styled lists, unordered lists as well as ordered lists. So right here, I just have a UL with some names, some superhero names here, and I'm going to give this UL a class of list group. Now, just doing that, you can see it just kind of removes the bullet points and the padding. But if I want to really style it, then the list items also have to have a class of list group dash item. So I'm going to put this in all of these and then save. And that's what a basic list group looks like. And we can have active and disabled statuses as well, or states. So let's say this one is active, so that has a background color there, and then let's say this last one here, disabled, and now it's kind of grayed out. So that's a simple list group. And then you also might want these to be links. So in that case, what we could do is just copy that, and instead of a UL, let's make this a div, and then instead of LIs, we can, let's see, I guess we'll just do these one by one. So we're going to change these to A tags, but we're going to keep the same class of list group item. And then you probably have some kind of link. So we'll just add a couple hrefs in here. And we'll save, and it looks the exact same, but now they're links. So they're good for like side menus and stuff like that. Or if you have a blog, you might have the categories on the side in the list group. There's also a flush style. So if I grab this list group again, and we go here, and then we'll just add on to this list group flush, and that's going to take away the the border. So it has a different kind of look. And then we can also do a numbered list. So if I change the UL here to an OL, which is an ordered list, I'll change this down here as well. And for this, we're going to add an extra class of list group numbered. And now we have a numbered list group. All right, so that's pretty much it. They're really simple. For badges, these are like you can use these for like tags and stuff like that, or you might have like a number next to a category name, and you'd have it wrapped in a background color and so on. So let's look at some badges. I have some headings here, and I'm going to put a span in this heading. Actually, let's do a span with the class of badge, And then you want to give it a background as well. Actually, if we just do badge, let's see what that gives us. And we're just going to put the text new. So you can't even see it without a background. So let's do BG dash, and we'll do primary. Okay, so that's what the primary badge looks like. And then I'm going to copy that. Let's put that in there, and we'll do success. Actually, let's do secondary. And they're the same size as the heading as well. So we'll do success. This one we'll do danger and warning. And we'll do info. Okay, so different color badges. And then you can put it in a button. So this button says notifications. You might want to have something that says how many notifications you have. So in here, we'll just go ahead and add a span with the class of badge, and let's do text dash BG dash dark for the background. All right, so something like that. And then you can also have badges in the list group. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see, we'll just start this. We'll just do this from scratch. So we'll have a list group. And let's do a list item. We're going to have a class of list dash group dash item. And I'm going to make this a flex box as well. So I'm going to kind of integrate some other stuff. So we'll make it a flex box, and then let's justify the content between, and then I'm going to align items to the start. Okay, so that's our list item. Now inside that, let's have a div. Let's do margin start 2, and let's do margin E auto. And then in that div, I'm going to have a div with a class of font weight bold, and let's say electronics. So these would be like categories. And then let's do under that, we'll just say like content for this item. And then underneath this div right here, I want to have a span with the class of badge, and let's do BG primary, and we'll make it rounded. So with badges, you have this class of rounded dash pill, which makes it look like a pill shape, and we'll just put 20 in there. Okay, so save that, and yeah, that looks pretty good. We can add a couple more. We'll just copy this one down a couple times, and let's see, we'll change this to, let's say, fashion, and what else? Let's change the color. We'll say danger, change that, and then for this last one here, we'll change to sports, and we'll say 30, and we'll change the color to success. All right, so we'll save that, and there we go. So we have a list group with some badges inside of it. All right, so that's it. In the next video, we're going to start looking at forms and input. All right, so now we're going to look at forms and input. So all the classes that we're going to use are mostly used for inputs. We don't have specific form classes, but we want to style the inputs because by default, you know that HTML forms are very, very ugly. So let's go within these form tags here, and we're going to create a basic login form. So I like to wrap the inputs and labels with some margin. So let's do MB3, so just margin bottom. And then we'll have a label, and there's a class that we can use called form label. And we'll say that this is for email. And then inside here, we'll say email address. Okay, then we want to have an input with a class of form control. So any text-based input, you're going to have that class of form control. So we'll make this an email. If I save that, so that looks pretty decent. If without the class of form control, it looks like that. So it puts it on, it makes it a block level element, it widens it, it makes the border lighter, so it just looks much better overall. And then what we'll do is just copy this down, and we'll make this one a password. Okay, so we'll just say password, and then I'll do a checkbox as well here. So let's do another .mb3, and then we'll put an input here of, let's do a class of form-check-input, and we want to give it a type of checkbox. Okay, and then let's see, we'll just put a slash here, and we'll give it an ID of remember. So this will be a remember me check. And then underneath that, we'll have a label, and we're going to give this a class, not a form label, but there's a class form check label, which should make it in line with the checkbox. So we'll say remember, and then for the text in here, we'll say remember me. All right, and then you just want a button, so we'll go under this div here, we'll say button, or you could do an input with the type of submit, so you could do that as well, and then just give it, let's say, I don't know, login, and just give it a class of btn, and btn dash whatever, we'll do primary. All right, so just a very basic form. Now, there's other fields that we can style, so I want to look at some of those. So let's look at a select field. So if we have a select, there's a class. Actually, let's wrap this in MB3. Now, there's a class of form-select. We used to put the form control on selects, but now there's a class for it. And we're going to need some options, so let's put the first option, which won't have a value. It's just like a label. So we'll say best time to call. And then we'll add an option and value, let's say morning. So I'll copy that down, and we'll make this afternoon. And this one will be evening. All right, so let's take a look at that. So that looks pretty good. It's on par with the other text-based inputs. And then for a text area, let's do MB3, and then text area. You can keep these if you want, but I'm just going to get rid of this stuff. So class is going to be just like the inputs. It's going to be form control for the text area. And you could put a placeholder in here, like say message, something like that. All right, then we have a switch, which there isn't a switch type in HTML, but we can style a checkbox like a switch. So the way that we do that is we add the class of form-check, and then also the class of form switch, and then inside that we put an input, and that's going to have a class of form-check-input, and it's going to have the type of checkbox. And let's just add a slash here, and we'll save that, and now you can see that gives us a little switch, which is pretty cool. What else? We can have inline checkboxes, so let's say MB3, and then I'm going to just copy, let's see, I'll grab the checkbox that we did up here. Okay, so let's add our class of form-check, and then we can do form-check-inline. And then inside that, I'll go ahead and put my checkbox, except, let's see, so we have input, type checkbox, class is correct. For a value, let's see, for ID, I'll just say ch1, and then let's put a value, and we'll just say option 1. Okay, and then we can have a label underneath, let's say label with a class of form-check label, and for ch1, and then for the label, we'll just put a 1. Okay, and then I'll just copy, let's see, form check inline, we'll just copy this down a couple times, and then we'll just change the 1 here. change those to 2s, and then let's see, this one we'll change these to 3, save, and now we have inline checkboxes. Okay, so next we have a toggle button. So the way that we do this, well, let's first put our MB3. The way we do this is we have a checkbox with the class of btn-check, and it's going to be the type of checkbox. All right, and then what we'll do is underneath that we'll have a button, and we'll give it a class of btn. You can style it however you want. I'm going to use btn primary, and let's say button toggle. Okay, and then I just want to put the ID. ID, we'll call it btn check, and then for the button, we want to have this button with the 4. Actually, this should be a label, I believe. Will that work? Yeah, this actually should be a label, which is a little weird, but the label, and then we have the 4 attribute, and we're going to set that to whatever the ID of the checkbox. There we go. So now you can see it's dark. Click it again. It's light. And we can change this, like if we want to do red. So no matter what color or context, it has that active state. Okay, now we have a range. So we can do a range here. Let's do MB3, and then we're going to have a label with the class of form label. And we'll say for range, and then an input, and this is going to have a class of form range, and the type is going to be range as well, and we'll give it an ID of range. All right, so now you can see we have this little slider here, and then we can also have it, see how it's just smooth, and I can put it wherever. You can also have it with steps, so I'm going to just copy that, paste that in here, and we're just going to add a couple attributes into this range. So I'm going to add a min, which I'll set to 0, so that's the minimum it can be, and then a max, I'll set that to 5, and then the step value, I'll set that to 0.5. So now with this one, notice that it kind of skips to its place. I can't just slide it freely. It goes to these steps. It starts at 0, it ends at 5, and each step is 0.5. And you can change those values if you want, obviously. Okay, now the last thing I want to look at is the input group. So a lot of times you might want like a search form where you just have the input and then you have the button that's pretty much connected to that input rather than putting it on a separate line or putting it over. So the way we can do this is with the class of input group. So let's say input dash group. I'm also going to do MB3 here. Okay, and now in the input group, we're going to have a span with the class of input dash group dash text. And I'm going to have an @ symbol. So let's say that this is an email address input. So we're going to have this @ symbol. And then underneath that, we'll have an input and give it a class of form control. And we'll make that email. And we'll just do a placeholder and say email. Okay, so now you can see we have the @ sign in here. It's not a button or anything. It's just for show. It's just for looks. But now if you wanted a button, then let's do that. We'll create another. Let's do another form here. Okay, so let's add another input group. So input dash group. And then I'm going to have an input. Let's give it a class of form control. Type, stick to text. And then underneath that, we're going to have the button. And let's do btn and let's do an outline. We'll say outline dash secondary, and we'll say submit. So now you can see that we have the input and the submit are basically connected. We have the rounded corners on the end here. We have the rounded corners on this side. And again, there's a lot of classes here, so don't worry about it if you don't remember them all. You can always go to the documentation and you can just search for absolutely anything, and it's pretty good. The documentation is pretty good where you search and it gives you what you want most of the time. All right, so that's forms and input styling. In the next video, I want to look at form validation display, because there's actually classes so that if we did have form validation, we could show, like, you know, not enough characters or something, and we could have it in red writing. We could outline the input with red and stuff like that. So we'll look at that next. All right, guys, so now we're going to look at form validation display. And this is not a JavaScript course, but I am going to add a little bit of JavaScript just to dynamically add a class onto this form, because that's how we can show the validation. So as you can see, I already have some fields here. So this is all stuff we've already done. We have a div with margin bottom 3, a label, an input, class form control, class form label, username, email address, city, and then I just have this agree to terms and conditions. So very simple, all stuff we've done. So right now you can see I have this required on each one, and HTML5 has this built in where if I try to submit and I have required, then this little thing pops up. However, you don't have to use that. If you want to have your own validation UI, then you can actually add an attribute onto the form. So I'm going to go into the form here and say no validate. So now if I save and I click submit, you'll see that it works. It doesn't have that little pop-up. So we want to create our own validation display. So when we do this, we can have basically a text output for if it's good or if it's invalid, or valid or invalid. So under the first input here, I'm going to have a class of valid dash feedback. And this is if it's good. So I'm just going to say looks good, right? And if I save, notice it doesn't show, because by default, since it's a valid feedback class, it doesn't show. If I didn't have this class here, then of course it's going to show. And then we can also put a message for if it's invalid. So we'll say invalid dash feedback. And for that, we'll say please pick a username. Okay, again, if I save it, we can't see it. So now I'm going to copy both of these, and let's go to the next one for the email. So we'll go ahead and paste that in. We'll keep looks good for the positive, and then for this one here, let's say please pick a valid email. All right, and then we'll go down here. So we have the city. We'll go under the input. We'll paste that in. We'll say please pick a city. And then we're going to go down here to the checkbox, and let's go under the label, and we're just going to have an invalid here. So let's say invalid dash feedback, and we'll say you must agree to the terms. All right. Now, that didn't change anything as far as we can see. However, if we have the class of was validated on the form, then what I just added will apply. So on the form, I'm going to say class, and let's say was dash validated. And then I'm going to save. And now we can see everything that we did. All right. Now, if I start to type, it'll actually change to looks good. And if this is a valid email address, like I'll say test@test, whatever, looks good. Okay, city, put whatever in there, that looks good, check it, looks good. All right, so I mean, you'll have to add some JavaScript in order for this to apply. So basically, you just have to add this class dynamically. So what I'm going to do is, instead of was validated, which is a special class that does what I just showed you, I'm going to put a class on it to grab it from the JavaScript, and I'll call it needs validation. All right. Now, I don't expect you guys to even know any JavaScript for this course, but I'm just going to write a little bit of it just to make this work. So let me just save this, and then we're going to come down here under the Bootstrap bundle and just add a script tag. And I'm going to select the form, so I'll create a variable, and then I'm going to use document.querySelector, and I can select the form by the class of needs-validation because I gave it that class. All right, so that'll bring the form into our JavaScript. Then we can add an event listener onto that with add event listener. We want to listen for a submit event. And again, if you don't understand this, that's fine. This is, you're not expected to know JavaScript to take this course. This is just an example. So on submit, we're going to run a function. I'm going to use an arrow function, and this will take in an event parameter. And then what I'm going to do is prevent the default. So e.prevent default. That means I'm just stopping the default submission. You know, when you submit a form, it submits to the file, so I'm stopping that. And then I can actually check for the form validity. So I can say if not form.check validity, is that right? Yeah. So if not form check validity, then we'll just say, actually, you know what? Let's move the prevent default into here. And yeah, so here we'll just, because we don't really want to do anything here, so we're just going to prevent default. Then else means that we're successful, so I'll just do an alert of success. Okay, and I want to show the either the valid or invalid feedback. So what I'll do is take the form and then add the class. So class list add, and I'm going to add the class of was validated. Okay, so we're adding it dynamically in our JavaScript. So if I put something here and submit, you'll see we're not seeing the alert success because it's not valid. So let's put in an email. So we'll say test@test.com, city. And if I click submit, still not working because I need to agree to the terms. Click submit, and now I get success. So it gives us a cool way to validate our form and show the user what's wrong or what's correct. Okay, so now we're going to look at alerts and progress bars. So alerts are just that. They're notifications, and they're commonly used in applications over just, static websites. So here I have a bunch of divs with some text, and we basically have all the same context / colors that we have with backgrounds, text, buttons, and so on. So I'm actually going to replace these with this. And you can see that each one has a class of alert. So you need that first class. So if we just have alert, it's going to look like this. It has the padding and all that. But then the alert primary will give it the blue color and the blue border. And it's typical to also add the role attribute as well and set that to alert. So again, we have primary, secondary, success, danger, warning, info, light, and dark. Okay, now if you want to have a link within the alert, let's just grab one of these. And let's see, we'll go ahead and paste that in here. And let's say I want to have a link in here. So I'll put an A tag and we'll just say example link. And then what I'm going to do is add a class onto this. And that class is going to be alert -link. Okay, so that just kind of, gives it the same color. If this was a danger, for instance, then that color is just a little darker than the background. All right, now you might want to have additional content in the alert. So let's see, I'll just copy that. And let's just get rid of everything in here. And let's say we want to have an H4. So there's actually an alert heading class that we can use. So we'll say well done. We probably want to make this a success alert. Typically, you'll probably use success and danger the most, because you'll use success for, confirmations and things like that, and then obviously errors for the red, the danger class. So we'll put a paragraph in here. Let's say lorem 10, and I'll put an HR, and then under that I'll have a paragraph, and let's say lorem 5. Okay, so you could do something like that as well. Now, we can also have a dismiss button, meaning we can click a button and it will go away. So what I'll do is grab, I'll grab the danger one. And we'll go right here under dismissing. And what we want to do is first off add to this wrapper div, I'm going to add alert dash dismissible, and then it can have different effects. So I want this to fade, and we're also going to give it a class of show because we want it to show initially. And then within here, I guess I'll just keep that text. We'll say something went wrong. All right, and then in here we need to have a button to dismiss. So we're going to go right in the div and let's have a button, and I'm going to give it a class of btn-close. All right, and we don't have to put anything within the button. And we do need an extra attribute of data-bs-dismiss. And we want to set that equal to close. Okay, and let's see. I think that should do it. Let's save that. And you can see that there's now an X button, and if I click that, nothing happens. Let's see, did I mess something up here? Data dismiss. Oh, I'm sorry, this should be alert. So data bs dismiss alert. So if I click that, now it goes away, it fades out. If I don't have that fade, class, then it just kind of, flicks away. But it gives you a better effect if you add fade to it. So those are alerts. Now we'll look at progress bars, which are just, lines that have a certain percentage filled. And the basic markup for this is going to be a class of progress. And I'm also just going to give it a class of MB4 just to add some space under it. So that's kind of the wrapper element. And typically we'll have a row of progress bar. Now inside that div, we're going to have a class of progress-bar. Okay, so basically this is the outline, this first div, and this is the fill. Okay, so if we look at this now, it's just going to be the outline because I haven't added any fill to this div. And the way we add the fill is with CSS. So you can either target it in your CSS file and do it that way, or you can just do it inline like this. So let's say I want it filled 25%, then I'm going to set this to 25, width to 25%. And there you go. So it's going to be that blue primary color by default. And then for accessibility, you can add some ARIA attributes. So we can say ARIA-value now, which is going to be, the value, which in this case is 25. And then we can also put the min value, so ARIA-min or value min, and that would be 0. And then we could do ARIA/value max, and that would be 100. Okay, so for like screen readers and things like that, it just shows you that this is goes from 0 to 100, and the current value is 25. Now let's say you want it to be a different color. What you could do is, let's just copy this, paste it in again, and you want to add your background on this inner div with progress bar. So we could say bg-success, and let's change we'll make it 50%. And we would also want to change this right here to 50 as well. Okay, so you can do all the different colors if you want. Now you can also have a label inside of it. So to do that, let's grab that and we'll go right here. Let's change it to a different color. We'll do danger and let's change it to, let's say 40%, 40. And then to have a label, you simply put the text inside the inner div. So if I save that, now you can see the label is in there and it says 40%. You can also have a striped style. So we'll go ahead and grab this one again. And we'll paste that in. And all you have to do is add to this progress dash bar dash stripes. Not stripes, striped with a D. And there we go. So now we have the stripes. You can also animate them. So let's grab this again. And we'll go ahead and just change the color up. Let's use warning. And we have progress bar striped. And then we're also going to add progress bar animated. And now if you look, you can see that the lines are being animated. All right, so that's pretty much it for alerts and progress bars. In the next video, we're going to look at different ways to style tables. Okay, so now we're going to look at tables, which is probably something you're not going to use that much, but we still do use tables for tabular data. If you have, like, let's say, an admin area that you're creating and you want to see all the users or products or something like that, then that's a good use case for a table. So as you can see, I just have a bunch of unstyled tables, very ugly looking. Looks like I'm missing a line break between one of them. Yeah, right here. Just add that. And just add these just to separate things out. So to style a table is very simple. On the table tag, we're going to add a class of table. And as you can see, it looks a hell of a lot better than this. Okay, so it just has, lines separating the rows, has the padding. So that's just a basic table. You can also have different variants or different colors. So let's say class equals table, and let's do table dash, we'll say table dash dark. And now we have a dark version of the table. Now, it's not just tables where you can add these variants. You can add them to table rows. So, for example, let's go to this table row right here, and I'm going to add a class of table-danger. And in this case, you're not going to add the table class. That just goes on the table itself, but we can add these variants. So now that has the red pinkish background. Now, you can also add it on a specific column. So I can say class, and let's say table dash warning, and now just this one column is yellow. All right, so those are the different variants. And then we can also do a striped table. So if we add here a class of table and also table dash striped, striped, what it's going to do is just make every other row have a gray background. We can also make hoverable rows. So if we add, let's say, class equals table, and we're also going to add table dash hover. And now if I come down here, you can see when I hover a row, it makes it dark. And then we can do bordered tables. So class equals table, and let's say table dash bordered. Okay, so that just gives a border around, the whole thing, kind of like an Excel spreadsheet. And then we can also do borderless tables. So for this last one here, let's say class table and table dash borderless. And now there's no line separating each row. All right, so I think it looks pretty clean. And as far as using tables, we're not going to use them obviously for layout like we did back, way back 15 years ago or so. But they are good for what they're meant for, which is tabular data. All right, so now we're going to look at creating breadcrumbs and pagination, which are ways to navigate our content. So we'll start with a breadcrumb, which is typically at the top of the page. And if you're on, like, let's say you have a home page, then you have an about page, and in the about page you have, let's say, a staff page where it shows your staff. So you might have home, about, and then staff, and you'll be able to have a link to go back to about if you want, or back to home. So let's create a breadcrumb. We're going to have a nav tag, and then in there it's going to be an ordered list with a class of breadcrumb. Okay, and then inside that we'll have an li with a class of breadcrumb. I'm going to say breadcrumb dash item, and we'll have a link in here, and let's say home, and then I'm going to copy that down a few times. So then let's say about, and for this last one, let's say staff. Okay, and then for the current page, we can put an active class. So for this last one here, let's say that that's active. And for accessibility, you can do aria-current and set that to page. And then you can also add on the nav aria label and set that to breadcrumb. Okay, and that's what it's going to look like. Now, by default, the divider is going to be a /, but you can actually change that. So what I'm going to do is copy this and then go under dividers, because that's what these are, is that they're dividers. And we can add some inline style here. And there's a custom property or a variable, which is bs-breadcrumb-divider. And what we can do is set that to whatever we want. We're going to just put some single quotes here, and let's say we want it to be a greater than sign, and then another single quote. So now if I save that, you can see it's using the greater than sign for the divider. So now let's get into pagination. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm just going to type this out. So again, we're going to use nav, and we can put aria label and set that to pagination. Or, I mean, you could put anything here. We could say like page navigation. And then inside the nav, we'll have a UL. So let's say UL and then a class of pagination. And each list item is going to have a class of page item. And inside that, we'll have an A tag. And inside that, this first one, let's say previous. And I'm also going to add onto this link here a class of page link. Okay, and then we'll just create a few of these. So I'll copy this down a couple times, and we're just going to change, let's see, this one to 1, 2, and 3. And then, actually, let's just save that, see what it looks like. Okay, and if we want, let's say, page 2 to be the active page, we can add the class of active. Now let's say we want to have a next, so I'll just copy this previous here and add that here. And instead of putting the word next, I'm going to put an arrow using an HTML entity. So we can do that with ampersand, and then we're going to do RAQUO semicolon. And for this, let's also add aria-label and set that to next. Okay, save that. Now you can see we have an arrow. So that's basic pagination. Active and disabled states. Well, I just showed you the active, but I'll just copy this. I'll take the active off here, and then put that down here. Okay, so 2 is active. Let's say we want. Let's say we actually want 1 to be active. So if 1 is active, then that means we can't have a previous, right? So let's say active on 1, and then let's go to previous, because it's the first page, so there is no previous. So on this one, where do we want to put this? We want to put this on the item, not the link. So page item, and then I'm going to also add disabled. So now previous is disabled because we were hypothetically on the first page. Now for sizing, we have different sizes. Okay, and all we have to do for that is add on to where we have the class of pagination. I'm also going to add pagination-sm. So you can see now it's a little smaller. And then we can also make it larger by adding pagination-lg. And now it's a little bigger. And then as far as alignment, we can move it to either the center or the end of the page. And we can do that by adding a class, let's say justify content end. And now you can see it's aligned to the end here. If we want it in the middle or the center, then we can add justify content center, and that will put it in the center. All right, so that's it. In the next video, we're going to look at a couple other utilities that Bootstrap offers. All right, guys, so I just have a couple other utilities that I want to show you that didn't really fit into any of the other videos. So the first one is truncate text. So let's say that this paragraph right here, we want to show this, maybe it's coming from a database, but we don't want to show all these lines. We want to cut it down to just one line of text. So what we can do is on the element that wraps the text, we can add the class of text-truncate. And if I save that, now you'll see it's only one line and it automatically adds the 3 dots as well. So that can be pretty helpful. The next one is the stretched link class. So basically, right here we have a card, right? We've already looked at all this. We know how cards work. And I have a button that has a link that I can go to. But let's say I want to make it so that if I click anywhere in this card, it takes me to wherever that button is. So to do that, we can go to the button, which is actually a link, and we can add the class of stretched link. So now if I save that, if I go anywhere in the card, you'll see the cursor changes to a pointer. Okay, it's not actually linking to anything, but whatever I put in this link, now I can get to by clicking anywhere in the card. So the next one is invisible. Now we looked at display none, which is the d-none class, and that will just make whatever that is totally go away. However, if we set it to invisible, we can't see it, but it still takes up that space. So it's the difference between display none and visibility hidden. Now there is also a class of visible, which obviously isn't going to do anything different than what we're seeing here. We see these 3 dots. We see three of them. I'm going to put the first one and the last one to visible, right? So that doesn't change anything. But the middle one, I'm going to use the class invisible. And now you can see that that is gone, and it still takes up that space. If I were to use d-none, then it doesn't take up the space anymore. It completely gets rid of it. All right, but there might be cases where you don't want it to show, but you still want it to take up that space. So you can use invisible for that. And then the last thing I want to show you are some float classes. Now, floats aren't really used much anymore now that we have Flexbox. We have other ways to align, but there are still float classes. So if you want to float to the start, which is to the left, you can do that. If you want to float to the end, you can do float-end. So now this is over here. You can use float none, which is just, the default. And then if you wanted to float on certain screen sizes, you could do that as well. So I could do like float-lg-end. So this last one here, you can see it's still at the start or the left, but once I hit the large breakpoint right there, it goes to the end. Okay, so you can do that as well. All right, so just some extra tools that you may find helpful.